In 1847, a widow in County Cork fed her 4 children on less than 2 pence a day for 6 weeks straight. She boiled the same pot every morning, and the children called it breakfast, lunch, and supper. That meal is number 7 on this list. A schoolteacher in Galway survived an entire winter on something most people today would pull from the ground and throw away. That's number 3. 2 of these meals were never meant to be food at all. Subscribe if you're staying. We're counting down from 10. Number 10. Meal cake. The ingredients are Indian cornmeal, water, and salt. You mix the meal with enough water to hold it together, press it flat, and cook it on a hot stone or griddle until it sets hard on both sides. It comes out dense and slightly gritty, with a faint, scorched smell that fills whatever room you're in. In the late 1840s, the British government distributed Indian cornmeal across Ireland as famine relief. A bag cost almost nothing, but the people receiving it had never seen it before and didn't know how to cook it properly, and many ate it raw and became violently ill. Meal cake was what they eventually learned to make when the instructions finally arrived too late for thousands. It was proof that survival has a learning curve, and some lessons cost everything. Number 9. Potato skin soup. The ingredients are potato skins, water, salt, and whatever scraps remain in the pot. You save every peel, every eye, every blackened fragment. Boil them in water until the liquid thickens and takes on color. Then strain or drink it as it is. It smells like wet earth and tastes like the memory of a real meal. During the worst years of the famine, a stone of potatoes, roughly 14 pounds, had cost about a penny in better times. But by 1847, even the skins were precious, because the blight had taken everything with flesh inside. Families in Connaught and Munster boiled peelings they had dried and saved from the last good harvest, stretching them across days. This soup was not sustenance. It was refusal, the refusal to stop. Number 8. Cabbage and salt. The ingredients are cabbage leaves and coarse salt. You pull the outer leaves, rub them with salt until they soften slightly, then eat them raw or boil them briefly in water until they go limp and dark. The taste is sharp, briny, faintly bitter, the kind of flavor that wakes you up rather than comforts you. Cabbage was one of the few crops the blight didn't touch, and in parts of Leinster in 1846 and 1847, families who still had a small garden plot survived almost entirely on it. A head of cabbage cost less than a farthing when you could find one to buy. Women kept the salt in cloth near their bodies to stop it from being taken. Salt was the only seasoning left, and they used it like it was currency, because some weeks it was. There is something that doesn't get said often enough about cooking when you have almost nothing. It takes more courage than cooking when you have plenty. When the cupboard is bare and the children are quiet in the way that isn't peaceful, standing at a stove and making something from almost nothing is not a small act. It is an enormous one. It is the act of saying, "Not yet. We are not done yet." People in 1847 knew this. Some people, watching this right now, know it too. Number 7. Boiled nettles. The ingredients are stinging nettles, water, and salt if it's available. You pick the young tops in spring, boil them hard for several minutes until the sting is gone completely, then eat them like greens or drink the cooking water as broth. They taste dark and mineral, somewhere between spinach and iron, with a warmth that settles in the chest. In the west of Ireland, where the famine hit earliest and hardest, women and children walked the roadsides in March and April pulling nettles by the handful, burning their hands because there was nothing else and the ground was still cold. A woman named Brigid, and there were thousands of Brigids, was recorded by a relief officer in Mayo in 1847 as feeding 6 people on nettles and water for 11 consecutive days. She's not famous. She should be. Number 6. Raw shellfish. The ingredients are whatever comes off the rocks. Mussels, limpets, periwinkles, small crabs. You pry them from the stone at low tide and eat them where you stand, or carry them home and boil them briefly in seawater. Cold, briny, slightly elastic. The taste of the sea without any of the romance people attach to it now. Along the western coastline of Ireland, Clare, Galway, Donegal, coastal families during the famine years survived on shellfish, when every other food source was gone, picking the shoreline so clean that the rocks were bare within walking distance of every village. There are accounts of people found dead on beaches, their mouths full of shell fragments, having eaten whatever they could find in their final hours. The tide kept coming in. Some people were there to meet it, and some were not. Number 5. Roadwork soup. The ingredients are whatever could be skimmed from a communal pot. Scraps of meal, greens, bones if available, water. The British government's public works scheme in 1846 and 1847 put starving men to work building roads to nowhere, roads that led to nothing, in exchange for wages that couldn't buy enough food to replace the calories the work burned. Some relief stations set up soup cauldrons nearby. Thin, lukewarm, barely seasoned, and the men drank it standing up between shifts, sometimes in the rain. It tasted like effort and indignity in equal measure. A laborer earning 8 pence a day could not feed a family of 5 in 1847 on those wages, and many men died on those roads, working, which is the cruelest possible way for a government to let someone starve. The roads are still there, you can walk them. Poverty food gets romanticized now. People call it rustic. They put it in restaurants with exposed brick and charge $12 for a bowl of something a starving woman made in 20 minutes from what she found at the edge of a field. There is nothing wrong with honoring old food, but we should be honest about what it cost the people who first made it. Not money, but everything else. Number 4. Seaweed broth. The ingredients are dried or fresh seaweed, water, and salt. You boil the seaweed until the water turns dark and slick and slightly thick. Then drink the liquid or eat the softened weed alongside it. It tastes of the ocean floor, deep, mineral, strange. And it warms you in a way that seems to come from somewhere below the stomach. Coastal communities in Connaught had eaten seaweed for generations before the famine, but during the hunger years of 1847 and 1848, it became the difference between dying and lasting another week for families along the Atlantic edge. Dried seaweed could be stored, could travel, and cost nothing to gather. It kept people alive who had no business still being alive. Number 3. Boiled turnips. The ingredients are turnips and water. You cut them rough, boil them until soft, and eat them plain. They taste faintly sweet when hot, faintly sour as they cool. Fibrous, filling in a way that doesn't last, but filling. Turnips survived the blight. They weren't beloved before the famine. They were cattle feed, considered beneath human dignity, and eating them meant admitting something about how far things had fallen. In parts of Leitrim and Roscommon in 1846, families who had never eaten a turnip in their lives were grateful for them, because gratitude adjusts to what's available. The schoolteacher mentioned at the start of this video ate nothing but boiled turnips and water for 3 months, one winter. He survived. He taught until he was 70. Number 2. Stirabout. The ingredients are Indian cornmeal or oatmeal and water. You boil the water, stir in the meal slowly, keep stirring until it thickens into a rough paste. It smells like wet grain, and it settles in the stomach like ballast. Stirabout was the meal most associated with famine relief kitchens. The Quakers served it across dozens of stations in 1847, and for many Irish families, it was the first food they had eaten in days when they finally arrived at the kitchen door. A relief worker recorded that some people wept when they received their bowl, and others were too far gone to hold the spoon. It was plain to the point of nothing. But plain is not nothing when the alternative is everything. There is a specific kind of hunger that is not about food. It is the hunger of sitting in a kitchen that used to hold more people than it does now. Of cooking for one when you learn to cook for 4. Of standing at the stove and asking yourself whether it's worth the effort tonight. The people who made these meals knew a version of that feeling. Not grief, exactly, but its cousin. They made the meal anyway. That is what I want you to take from this. Number 1. Indian meal porridge. The ingredients are Indian cornmeal, water, and salt. You bring water to a boil, add the meal in a slow stream. Stir until it thickens into something between a porridge and a paste, and eat it hot. It tastes of almost nothing. Grain and water and salt. And yet people ate it and lived. Indian cornmeal arrived in Ireland in 1846 as emergency relief, imported by Prime Minister Peel in what was, by his standards, a genuine if inadequate gesture. 100,000 pounds worth was purchased and distributed, each pound of meal costing less than a penny to produce. It was unfamiliar, often prepared wrong, sometimes distributed without fuel or pots to cook it in, and yet it kept hundreds of thousands of people alive through one winter. Number 1, not because it's the best, but because it held the most people. It showed up. This week, make one of these. Just one. Not all 10. One. Pick potato skin soup or stirabout, whichever feels closer to where you are right now. Set a place at the table, not the couch, the table. Sit down and eat it slow. Then tell me in the comments, could you make it through a week on stirabout alone, or would the turnips break you first? These meals are not history. They are instructions left behind by people who had nothing, for people who might someday need them. The word for that is dignity.